installment of Dr. Darnise's House of Religion, Magic, and Conjure. Thanks for joining. Hey, do you see that new button there to join? You can join now and become a house member. And that just means that you enjoy these videos so much that you would like to support the channel. And you can do that for, very small amounts of money. All are appreciated. Um, yeah, so like that. The channel is growing and I appreciate that so much. So, hey, if you feel like joining, that's appreciated. Um, or else just like, because YouTube likes when you like. So I like when you like. Anyway, what's this video about this time? So today I want to talk about how the Southern Baptists are at it again, and they are targeting Vice President Kamala Harris with their racialized attack, racialized and sexualized attack. And so maybe you've seen in the news recently where this, I don't know, criticism, this labeling of Vice President Harris as a Jezebel. And so the reason that I'm talking about that on this channel is because Jezebel is a biblical figure, a woman who was much maligned in the Bible. So when the Southern Baptists today, who are largely white, when they are labeling and criticizing Kamala Harris using that term Jezebel, they are specifically referring to this biblical character, this biblical woman who was misunderstood to be promiscuous and unfaithful. So we're going to unpack a little bit of that right here and now, because for one thing, when I teach my classes, I always say I have to stop a minute or pause a minute and save Jezebel from the misinterpretation that has plagued her name for millennia. Okay, so there's a couple things I'm talking about here is, one, who is Jezebel in the Bible, and what does it mean for the Southern Baptists to attack her with that term now? So you might have seen my other video about the Southern Baptist Convention and how they have decided, the presidents of the various seminaries of that denomination have decided that they're not going to teach anything about critical race theory in their seminaries. So the people, where people go to get trained to be clergy in their churches, they've decided that their people, their ministers don't need to understand anything about race in America. As much as that is plaguing all of America, as much as it is a chronic illness that repeatedly shows itself, the Southern Baptists have decided that, no, you know what? Our clergy don't need to know anything about that, and we're not going to offer critical race theory in our schools. So, as I've said before, that means that their clergy are completely what should we call it? Inadequate when it comes to dealing with an American illness, really. It's a virus, white supremacy within Christianity, white supremacy within America in general. Anyway, so that was that video. So more recently, what they've started to do is, since the election, since the inauguration, and now we have Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, they have decided to call her Jezebel, again, which harkens back to this trope or this symbol from the Bible of a woman who was considered promiscuous, who would not be silenced, who was a foreign woman compared to the Jewish people, right? So let's talk about Jezebel for a moment and black women, black womanhood. Jezebel, as I mentioned, is a character from the Old Testament, right? Who marries she's a Phoenician, and she marries a Jewish king. And in marrying him, already that is a problem, because the Jews believe that, a Jewish man should not marry a foreign woman to start with. However, this particular king marries Jezebel, who's a foreign woman, meaning she's not Jewish, right? She's Phoenician. She has her own religion. Well, bad enough that he married a foreign woman, right? But now she continues to be outspoken. She continues to practice in the ways of her people, her traditions. She maintains her own, shall we say, indigenous spiritualities, and the Jews don't really like that in the story, we're told. So Jezebel is then portrayed as a woman who is unfaithful, right? Because she won't get in line with what her husband's religion is, and she won't do what she's told. So she's unfaithful, unreliable. And in her tradition, they have a pantheon of gods, or a polytheistic understanding about God and the cosmos. So it appears to them that she serves many gods as opposed to just the one Yahweh, right? I hope you're staying with me here. And if you've ever read, the scripture, you know the story already. Jezebel is a woman who continues to serve her own religion. And because of that, her critics, the other Jews in the story, say she is promiscuous. But see, here's where we get it wrong in contemporary interpretations. We hear, oh, she served many men, or she served many gods, she was promiscuous, and we think that means that she was having sex with a bunch of different people. That's not what that meant. So it's a misnomer, right? It's a wrong label to say that a Jezebel is a woman who's loose and promiscuous sexually. But in English and in Western society, that's what the name has become. So it's a term that's not so much used today, but in earlier parts of the 20th century, people would say, oh, this woman is a Jezebel. And that meant that she was loose and that she was disloyal and not to be trusted. Because in the biblical story, here was this woman who would not do what she was told. And she would not do what was expected of her. That is, take on your husband's ways and stop doing your own religion. But Jezebel refused. Now, it went all badly for Jezebel because she was so determined to, do things according to what her own people do that she couldn't be deterred from it. And ultimately, they killed her. I mean, just to get to the, I should say spoiler alert, but it's the Bible. If you haven't read it, you are not hanging on the edge of your seat right now. Anyway, I should look up the actual scripture reference. I don't have my Bible right here handy. I should have done that. I'll put it in the comments. I'll put the exact scripture reference that I'm talking about in the description box, and then pin it in the comments, unless somebody watching has it. But I'll do that. Anyway, so this image we get of Jezebel, a misnomer, the misunderstanding of Jezebel is that she's a promiscuous woman who is unreliable and unfaithful. So now fast forward to when Black women who are enslaved here in the Americas, in the United States in particular, there was an understanding that Black women were promiscuous, that African women, because they were wearing few clothes in Africa, throughout the continent of Africa, that they must be sexually voracious and lustful, right? Because here they are naked or next to naked. To the outside European viewer, the European man who's coming from a culture where, first of all, it's cold throughout Europe, and through a certain cultural perspective that said that women are to dress a certain way. Well, when these European men met these African women in Africa, as hot as it is, and according to their own cultural traditions, they were scantily clad. So to the European man, that meant that African women were sexually available, were lustful, and that men who succumbed to their own lust for her, they couldn't help themselves. So essentially Black women were Jezebels who enticed white men to seduction. So the Black woman becomes the seducer of white men. So you see where I'm going with this, right? So on the plantation, when white men were raping Black women, they could justify that by saying, well, Black women are lustful and without any shame and without any honor. because look, they're dressed so that way, and look at their bodies. Their bodies are larger. And a man can't help it. She's a seductress. She's conniving. All of these terms got associated with one, Jezebel from the Bible. Secondly, that label was applied to black women because of the lustful gaze of the white man. And he had to justify that some way, so he blamed her, which is not at all new, right? Women often bear the shame of being sexually stigmatized or being shamed somehow for our body shapes. No matter what we wear, no matter what, women get shamed. And so even these women who were in slavery, having no power to tell their slave master, no, get off me, even she is blamed. So there's a trope or symbol called the Jezebel that was attached to black women. The opposite of that is the mammy. So probably you've heard of the mammy, right? Because that gets played out in popular culture quite a bit. Well, so does the Jezebel, actually. So when you think about, that usually plus size woman, maybe dark skinned woman, who is the nanny, the mammy, the nurturer, the one who cares about the family. She's the cook. She's the one she's in the household, running the kitchen, that kind of thing, the mammy. And the Jezebel, in contrast to that, is the younger woman who's attractive and who's still of childbearing age. And she is alluring to men. And so she gets this description as a Jezebel, as I said, in comparison with the mammy, in comparison with the sapphire, who's the angry black woman, which is, we know how that goes. So doing all of that story, and I'm looking at a book on my shelf that's called Ain't I a Woman? If you want to know more about this, there's a little volume called Ain't I a Woman by Deborah White. Ain't I a Woman? And she talks about these tropes, the Jezebel and the mammy, and how these were applied to black women on the plantation and still applied to black women. It's just we don't say Jezebel now, people say hoe now, right? And people still say mammy with certain figures, but people don't usually say Jezebel anymore. Younger people don't know that term, but they do know the term hoe. So now when we look at how the Southern Baptists are coming after Kamala Harris and using that term Jezebel, it is a loaded term. It is not just that they decided to talk about how they don't agree with her politics when it comes to things like pro-choice or pro-life, right? These are conservative evangelical Christians, so they tend to be pro-life, which means anti-abortion, as opposed to pro-choice, right? Because the conservatives will say, well, if you're pro-choice, that means you're pro-abortion. I don't think anybody's pro-abortion. It's that we're pro-choice. A woman should be able to decide for herself what she's going to do. In any case, the Southern Baptist leadership who are now calling Kamala Harris Jezebel, they say that it's because she is unfaithful to the gospel, unfaithful to Christianity, and therefore incompatible with Christian American mainstream values. What they're trying to do is say that Vice President Harris is herself incompatible with American values. You see how they're doing this? Because their membership, Southern Baptist Christians, will hear that term Jezebel and they will connect, oh, she's a Jezebel, so she is a hoe, she is unfaithful, she can't be trusted. It's a conflation of these terms, and again, younger people might not exactly get it, but people who are over 45 will definitely make the connection, whether or not we even agree with it or know we're making the connection, because it was such a common understanding about Jezebel, right? To be called a Jezebel meant somebody was saying that you are loose. And so here is this accusation, this label being leveled against Kamala Harris to diminish her in her political office, in her public presentation of herself and her public authority as Vice President of the United States. So if you can demean her, then it continues to create this division, right, between conservatives and progressive people, Republicans and Democrats, generally speaking, right? It creates this divide so that conservatives can continue to look at Kamala Harris and say, she's not really one of us, right? Which is, and the sexual, sort of connotations around that are, the hypocrisy continues to be astounding, because their guy 45, we already know the egregious sexual incompatibility, shall we say, whoremongering of that previous president. And that was fine, right? They could ignore that. So anyway, I just came on here to share that I was contacted by the Huffington Post, and they wanted a comment from me about this. And, I said, oh, that would be a good topic for my own channel to go on here and talk about what is the meaning of the Southern Baptists of all people leveling this term Jezebel against Kamala Harris, because it's a very particular kind of criticism. It's really, it's layered with all of these meanings against a woman in a sexist way, in a racialized way, misogynoir, we call it when it's an intersection of being black and woman. It's a form of sexism that is particularly against black women. And it's been a particular theme against black women, at least since contact with Europeans, who determined that black women were sexually available, and a white man couldn't help himself, and it's her fault. She's the one who seduced him using all of her immoral, lustful ways. And so, you have to be aware at the kind of criticism that gets leveled at us, particularly as black women, because it is often not just, a political difference. There's also the racism and the sexism involved as well, which is why there's, black women talk about having a very particular kind of experience in terms of dealing with racism and sexism. Right? It's not just one or the other for us. We cannot just choose one or the other. Are we black or are we woman? Sometimes black men put us in that position of choosing. You have to be black first. Well, I can't really be black first. I mean, I could try, but there are some other things that are coming down the pike at me because I'm also a woman. So there's an intersectionality of being black and woman. And when oppressive things come at us that way, it is called misogynoir. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there, and let me know if you want to know more about this, more about Jezebel, more about other biblical women. I was having a conversation about the book of Esther and Esther herself, and the kind of forgotten queen at the beginning of that story, Vashti. Put in the comments if you know something about the book of Esther and Vashti. She's in and out very quickly in that story. Reminds me of a black woman who said, I'm not going through all that, even if it means I get put out. So anyway, that's it. Bye for now. Remember to hit the like button, y'all. It helps. And what else do I want to say? Yeah, sign up, join with the membership. We do, let me see, what is one of the things you get if you sign up for the membership? We will do members only live sessions once a month. That will be one of the things that happens. So, all right. Thanks for joining in. And that's it. Bye for now.